Today, we're digging into one of the most incredible stories of modern history, the rise of mass nationalism in India. This is all about how a massive, diverse subcontinent began to see itself as one nation, fighting for one single cause. So, how did it all happen? Let's get into it. Just take a look at this. This one photo from 1919 really captures the heart of what we're talking about. See, this wasn't about a few thinkers in a quiet room anymore. We're talking about huge, popular movements with ordinary people flooding the streets. It was a complete game changer. And that brings up a huge question, right? How do you actually pull that off? How do you unite hundreds of millions of people with different languages, different religions, different lives, all under the control of the massive British Empire? To really get why things exploded in the 1920s, you've got to look at what happened right after World War I. Indians had poured soldiers and resources into the war, and people were really hoping things would get better. But, well, what they got was the exact opposite. The situation after the war was just brutal. To pay off its war debt, Britain slammed India with huge tax increases. Prices for basic stuff doubled, which made life incredibly hard. And on top of that, villages had seen their men forced into the army. Then came crop failures, famines, and a horrific flu epidemic. It was a perfect storm of anger and despair. And the human cost was just staggering. The 1921 census shows that somewhere between 12 and 13 million people died just from the famines and the epidemic. Any hope people had that their wartime sacrifices would pay off was totally gone. The whole country was a powder keg, just waiting for a spark. And right at this very moment, a new leader steps onto the stage. Mahatma Gandhi came back to India in 1915, and he brought with him a brand new, radical idea about how to fight back. And listen, this wasn't just some theory he dreamed up. As you can see from this picture in South Africa, Gandhi had already led mass protests against racist laws there. He was bringing a strategy to India that he knew could work. He called this idea Satyagraha. At its heart, it was simple, but honestly profound. It was all about the power of truth. Gandhi believed that if your cause was right and you were fighting injustice, you didn't need violence. You could win by appealing to your oppressor's conscience, not by physically fighting them. You can't say it better than he did himself. He called it pure soul force. And it wasn't passive at all. It was a really active, disciplined kind of struggle that was all about nonviolence. And this idea, it would become the engine for the entire national movement. So what happens when this powerful new philosophy of nonviolent protest slams headfirst into the brute force of a colonial empire? Well, in 1919, India was about to find out. Things escalated with terrifying speed. First, the British passed the Rowlatt Act, which basically let them jail political activists without a trial. Gandhi called for a nationwide strike, a hartal, to protest. In the city of Amritsar, police opened fire on a peaceful march, and just 3 days later, the horrific Jallianwalla Bagh massacre happened. And make no mistake, this wasn't some accident in the chaos. The British commander, General Dyer, later said his goal was to produce a moral effect. He wasn't trying to break up a crowd. He was trying to terrify an entire population into submission. The aftermath was a brutal crackdown under martial law. The empire's response was clear. It wasn't going to be negotiation. It was going to be intimidation and violence. And seeing this, Gandhi knew the movement had to get much, much bigger. The horror of Amritsar became the catalyst for the very first truly all-India mass movement. Gandhi's new plan was called non-cooperation. And the logic behind it was really simple. British rule only worked because Indians cooperated with it. So what if they just stopped? The main weapon here was the boycott. That meant refusing to be a part of anything that held up the British system. Don't buy their stuff, don't go to their schools, don't work for their government. The whole idea was to just peacefully withdraw. And it was all planned out in stages. It would start with symbolic things like people giving back titles the government had awarded them, and then it would ramp up from there. The plan was clear: grind the administration and the economy to a halt from the inside without ever resorting to violence. So the movement just explodes across the country. But here is where it gets really interesting and, a lot more complicated. The rallying cry was for Swaraj, or self-rule. But what did that word actually mean to all the different people who were joining the cause? In the cities, the boycott was a massive success. I mean, just look at these numbers. The value of imported foreign cloth was nearly chopped in half in a single year. That was a huge economic punch to the British. But Swaraj wasn't a one-size-fits-all idea. For the urban middle class, it meant leaving British jobs and schools. For peasants out in Awed, it was a fight against sky-high rents and forced labor. For tribal communities, Swaraj meant getting back access to the forest they depended on. And for plantation workers, it was as simple as the freedom to leave the plantation and just go home. And this is so important to understand. While everyone was fighting under that same banner of Swaraj, they all had very different problems and very different goals. The huge challenge for Gandhi and Congress was figuring out how to weave all these separate fights into one single national movement. And as the source material says, that unity, it didn't come without conflict. Ultimately, the non-cooperation movement didn't bring Swaraj within a year like they'd hoped. It was called off, and the movement entered this new period of debate and really reflection. Gandhi needed a new idea. So why was it withdrawn? Well, it was because of a violent clash between protesters and police in a town called Chauri Chaura. For Gandhi, who was committed to nonviolence, that was a sign the country just wasn't ready yet, so he called the whole thing off, which left a lot of people feeling pretty let down. So the question became, what now? How could he fire up the nation again and bring everyone back together? He needed a new symbol for the fight, something so universal that it would mean something to every single person in India, whether you were a rich businessman or the poorest farmer. And he found it in the most ordinary thing you can imagine: salt. Everyone needed it, everyone used it, and the British taxed it. It was the perfect symbol. But the real question is, how could this simple, everyday household item be turned into the weapon that would, once again, unite millions and shake an empire to its core?